Hi, this is Shira Rubinoff. I'm here with Rick Echevarria, Vice President, General Manager of Security for Intel. Rick, it's a pleasure to be with you here today.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about a topic that is top of mind for all organizations. People are discussing it. We're getting deep into it, the zero trust of security, which brings strategy while unlocking new opportunities for businesses, collaboration, and insights, even with sensitive or regulated data. So, Rick, zero trust is broken down, as we know, into 5 pillars: identity, device, network application, workload, and data. So, how do you believe an organization can achieve proper zero trust across each of these pillars and do it in a smooth fashion?
It's sort of interesting because you have the 5 elements of that zero trust construct, and then you have all of the other considerations that go into your overall security hygiene. One of those considerations that we are still surprised with many of the customers that we talk to that is not top of mind is the role that hardware plays in zero trust. Um, if you think about the level of the sophistication of attacks today, it is really important for software, hardware, services to come together to deliver that defense in depth, and specifically in the space of zero trust, where you're trying to protect so many different assets, data, identity, the network. The role of hardware becomes important, and it's an important consideration as Intel has been and continues to invest in its security roadmap holistically, from the endpoint to the edge of networks to the cloud.
I think that's very important how you highlighted the both facets of security, the hardware and the software. And I think in typical ways, people are thinking of about personnel, the cyber hygiene of a human aspect, and more of the software. So it's important to also look at the hardware aspect of it. So that's great that you highlighted that. Thank you. Zero trust, it also shifts from a network-based perimeter to identity-based perimeter, which improves compliance, as we know. And this at times is easier said than done. So, Rick, what helpful tips can you share with our audience to help them ease into a zero trust model when at times, if they're not using it yet, how can they ease into it?
Well, it's a great question to ask, and actually, it is very timely because it is at the heart of work that we have been doing recently, and especially leading up to the collaborations that we're going to announce at RSA. They're at the heart of how do you start on that zero trust journey. And this may not be a surprise, but it may be a surprise to the audience. I think that one of the first places we want our audience to consider is the decision on the endpoint device. The endpoint device, I'll use the term PC, is it's where that hygiene starts. It still continues to be the number one source of attacks, the biggest attack surface for enterprises. And it's a place where we have been collaborating with the industry so that, going back to the hardware, the silicon is actively participating in not only securing the endpoint, but also, as we will soon be announcing, securing that access from the endpoint to the network edge. And there are some things we can do in the identity space, specifically around the device itself. But what's also really important is the work that we're doing on the posture of that endpoint device, and how that posture then get communicated to the next set of security controls that then allow that access to the edge. And if you think about this whole zero trust concept, there are a lot of ways in which the architecture of companies is changing, right? To remove that perimeter, to go from device to an edge device, and then to the cloud. Now we're integrating our silicon to be an active part of that set of controls that are required to provide, the best attestation of those accesses.
Well, I think that's really important. You just highlighted something that people really need to think about is the journey of where they have to buckle down and really focus on the security on the entire journey of it. It's not just specifically at one point or another, it's the full journey. And there's always the different attack vectors that could come in on areas where they're not locked down. So that's super important that you highlighted. Now I want to
Yes.
talk about something that, is top of mind for CISOs. And this is a conversation I've heard time and time again that they're faced with constant challenge of determining where to spend their security budgets. Companies now are locked down. There's only so much money that can go around. And when it comes to security budgets, there's always something great out there. You know, I look at security as good to have, nice to have, and need to have, three different kinds of buckets. We figure out and how do the CISOs get to the place of the need to have, they really have to look at all different parameters. So there's so many ways, so many more products to add where they can lighten up and update legacy systems. So Rick, what advice can you give CISOs on where to focus their technology buys when looking to deliver business values to their organizations as they look to scale, drive down costs, and deliver more services, and really keep within their budgets, but actually highlight the areas that they really, really need to pinpoint on?
That's a great question. And really, you know, in a way, it's a hard question to answer. I've always thought of every company's infrastructure and business as fingerprints. They're all different. You know, everybody has a different set of challenges that they're dealing with. And at the end of the day, you know, investments in security are really around risk management. So you have to look at your organization holistically and look at what are the assets that are most important for you to protect, right? And though I can't really, you know, answer that question precisely for every CISO, what I can tell you is that when it comes to the ways in which we are trying to help CISOs address this problem is by, again, making investments in what I consider the most comprehensive hardware and services-based, silicon-based security roadmap in the industry. And we focus on three areas, and we touch on some of them. On the endpoint, right? This is, again, it's still that big surface area of attack. Zero trust, network access, and collaborations there to talk about that hygiene that we just mentioned. And then in a third space called confidential computing. And confidential computing is going to become more and more relevant to CISOs and to line of businesses, because at the end of the day, we all want to capitalize on a very, very important asset that we all have, and that's data. Okay. We want to capitalize on that asset. Now, the challenge that we've had as an industry is that we have been doing a pretty good job for protecting data when it's at rest, with, you know, a lot of investments in encryption and, you know, long-lived roadmap in that space. We have done a, you know, increasing better job with data in use by securing networks, HTTPS, acceleration of encryption, again, of network traffic. So we've done a very good job. The industry have focused there. But the one area that is a big opportunity for us is data in use, And that's where this space that we call confidential computing is going to become more and more important, is giving businesses the ability to, with the right privacy type of enhancing techniques, as well as hardware-based controls for data, give them the ability to access that data while it's in use.
Well, that's extremely important advice. And I'd like to add an extra question over there. You know, as you talk about what the most important asset of an organization, we all talk about data is king. Know where your data sits, know who has access to it. So when you talk about data in use, think about third parties, how they're accessing the data, how they're getting in. What advice can you give organizations around that? Because that's something organizations typically struggle with, is securing it down. Data at rest, yes, we know where it is. We know where it's sitting. But in use is usually a problem, you know, it's securing down the different parameters of it.
Yes. And it is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. The space of data and use, to me, Shira, is one of the most exciting spaces, because is where security, if you think about security in the usual terms, you think about controls and protection, right? Which is part of the attributes of confidential computing, but it's really what it does. It becomes a business enabler. And what do I mean by that? If you look at the way that confidential computing is being deployed today and that access to the data, it's allowing companies to do things that they couldn't do before. You look at the work we've done with the University of Pennsylvania around brain tumor research, and those advances in healthcare, they're made possible by the fact that now you have a hardware-based security control that allows multiple parties to share their data. And that unleashes a tremendous amount of power for industries, especially going back to health and life sciences. There's a lot of research that we're enabling to happen that couldn't otherwise happen before. The other space where I see confidential computing deployed that is really exciting is in the ability to create new processes, automate new processes, because that data, again, is available. We're doing a lot of work with in Germany on the digitization of different processes, including things like the digital prescription process. Germany's a thought leader in this space because of the privacy, sensitivity in the country, and they're really deploying confidential computing for new use cases, whether it's the e-prescription example that I mentioned, or is it to access data that allows them to improve their infrastructure for things like traffic management. So this access to data through confidential computing, again, is a business enabler as much as it is about control. And I'll make one more point, because you brought up the third party piece and the access. Many companies want to move compute to the edge of networks, and sometimes that requires them to put valuable assets in somebody else's data center, right? Yes. So how do you trust that it's not your data center, but you want to leverage that infrastructure to put your compute at the edge? That's where techniques like confidential computing come into play, because it gives you the ability to manage the trust boundary. Who has visibility? Who has access to your data and your most valuable IP in that sort of scenario? So again, it becomes a business enabler. I can move my compute to the edge, and I can do it with the confidence that I can control the access, the trust boundary for my very important assets.
Well, Rick, you've shared some really valuable insights with our audience. Thank you for that. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with, like any last maybe cybersecurity tips or any other areas around zero trust that you'd just like to highlight or pinpoint for our audience as we wrap up this interview?
Yeah, I think as somebody here who's representing Intel, we're committed to security. We invest quite a bit in our security development practices. We invest in product assurance. We actually recently published a product security report where we are sharing with the industry the outcomes of all the work we're doing in bug bounty, community collaboration, et cetera, so people get a sense for the extent to which Intel is investing. And then the third piece is that when we invest in our portfolio of security technologies, we invest as much in partnering with the security ecosystem, work very hard at delivering the best, most optimal security outcomes that we have for the audience. So the one thing I would like the audience to do is two things. Number one is really think through the importance of hardware as part of your defense in depth and your security portfolio, because it sets the right foundation. And let's not forget, hardware usually is the most privileged position from a security, from an attack vector perspective, right? That's the first point. And then the second point is really look after those partnerships that we are, in which Intel is collaborating with the security ecosystem, because that's where we actually instantiate that defense in depth. That includes hardware, includes software, includes services, working together to bring the right capabilities that give you the right context so you can apply the right security controls. And that really, at the end of the day, is the best way in which can help the audience address the challenges that today's security landscape represents for them.
Well, that's wonderful. Certainly, with working together, sharing of information, collaboration, that brings better security to everybody. Rick, thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure our audience really appreciates all the wonderful advice and tools that you've given them today. Thank you.
Thank you, Shira. Appreciate it.
Thank you.